In the days following the Tower of Babel, when the earth groaned under the weight of idolatry, magic, and the worship of unclean spirits, a man named Abram was born in Ur of the Chaldees, a thriving Sumerian city nestled in the heart of Mesopotamia. He was the son of Terah, a descendant of Shem, the righteous son of Noah. Terah had 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran, the latter being the father of Lot. Though Ur was advanced in science and civilization, its soul was corrupted. It was steeped in sorcery, ancestor worship, and demon veneration. Terah himself was an idol craftsman and temple official, employed under the infamous Nimrod, king of Babel, an archetype of rebellion against God. From a young age, Abram was disturbed by his father's profession. He often questioned the lifelessness of idols, their inability to speak, act, or save. One day, in a moment of divine zeal, Abram smashed all the idols in his father's shop, sparing only the largest one. When Terah demanded an explanation, Abram cleverly replied that the largest idol had destroyed the others in a quarrel. Terah, enraged by the mockery, reported him to Nimrod, who ordered Abram to be thrown into a fiery furnace. But God miraculously delivered him, and he walked out unscathed, like a divine flame untouched by earthly fire. After his deliverance, Abram began to seek the true Creator. He turned his eyes to the heavens, not to worship the stars or sun as many did, but to understand the design behind them. He cried out for revelation, and in response, God sent the angel of the presence, the archangel Yahweh, who revealed divine mysteries and declared, "I am he who brought you out from the fire of the Chaldeans. Leave your father's house, your country, and your kin to a land I will show you. I have chosen you to be the father of many nations." Realizing the danger in Ur, and perhaps fearing Nimrod's further retaliation, Terah feigned repentance and secretly sent Abram to Noah and Shem, who were still alive and dwelling apart from the wickedness of the world. For 39 years, Abram lived under their mentorship, learning righteousness, the laws of creation, and the deeper truths of monotheism. Eventually, Abram reunited with Terah, Lot, Nahor, and Sarai, his beautiful but barren wife. Together they departed for Haran, another pagan city in Mesopotamia. There, Abram began to preach openly against idolatry, converting many to the worship of the Most High God. Before leaving Haran, Abram built an altar and burned incense to heaven, declaring his break from false worship. Led again by the angel of the presence, Abram entered the land of Canaan, journeying through Shechem, Bethel, and the Negev. At each site he built altars, called on the name of Yahweh, and offered sacrifices. These 7 altars marked a spiritual cleansing of a land riddled with demonic influence. God revealed to Abram the calendar of holy times, the movements of the heavens, and showed him visions of the stars, not for astrology, but as signs of his covenant. Amid this journey, a famine struck Canaan, and Abram sojourned to Egypt. Fearing for his life because of Sarai's beauty, he said she was his sister. Pharaoh took Sarai into his palace, but God struck Egypt with plagues. Sarai prayed, and an angel appeared, guarding her purity. Pharaoh, realizing divine wrath, released Sarai and lavished Abram with gifts: silver, gold, livestock, and Hagar, an Egyptian maidservant. Back in Canaan, Abram returned to Bethel, only to find strife between his and Lot's herdsmen, as their wealth had grown too vast. With humility, Abram offered Lot first choice of land. Lot chose the fertile plains of Sodom, drawn by material gain, while Abram remained in the highlands, where he continued building altars and calling on God. After Lot departed, God reaffirmed his promise, saying, "Lift your eyes. All the land you see I give to you and your descendants forever." From a high place near Hebron, Abram saw a panoramic vision, from Dan to the river of Egypt. God revealed to him the generational future, a time of bondage in Egypt, followed by a great deliverance, and the eventual coming of a righteous man, seated at God's right hand. Abram built more altars across the land, claiming it spiritually. Soon after, war erupted. 5 Canaanite kings, including those of Sodom and Gomorrah, rebelled against Chedorlaomer, the overlord of the east. In retaliation, Chedorlaomer led a coalition of eastern kings to crush the rebellion. These eastern kings weren't just political powers. They represented a spiritual opposition to monotheism and sought to extinguish Abram's growing influence. In the war, Lot was captured as Sodom was plundered. A survivor fled and informed Abram. Without hesitation, Abram gathered 318 trained men, led by his trusted servant Eliezer, and pursued the enemy to Dan in the far north. At night, with divine assistance and even angelic forces, Abram struck and routed the armies. The Lord sent upon them a portion of his power, and the enemies fell like grass before the scythe. Returning victoriously, Abram was met by Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of the Most High God. Many traditions identify him as Shem, son of Noah. He brought out bread and wine, blessed Abram, and said, "Blessed be Abram by God, Most High, possessor of heaven and earth." In reverence, Abram gave a tenth of all he had, acknowledging God's divine order. The king of Sodom offered him wealth, but Abram refused. "I will not take even a thread, lest you say, I made Abram rich." In a divine response to Abram's integrity, God appeared again and made a sacred covenant. Abram questioned how he would inherit the promise, as he had no son. God instructed him to bring a heifer, goat, ram, turtle dove, and pigeon. Abram divided the animals and laid them opposite each other, forming a covenantal path. As night fell, a deep dread seized Abram. Then he saw a smoking fire pot and a blazing torch pass between the pieces, symbols of God's presence. This meant God unilaterally bound himself to the covenant. Soon after, led by Yahweh, Abram was taken to Mount Horeb, where he offered the same sacrifices. There God opened the heavens. 1. He saw Azazel, the fallen angel, cast into the abyss for corrupting mankind. 2. He saw the future idolatry of Israel, their exile in Egypt, and the corruption of kings. 3. He beheld a vision of a man seated at God's right hand, who would destroy evil, redeem the righteous, and fulfill the covenant, a prophetic glimpse of the Messiah. Years later, when Abram was 99, God appeared again, saying, "Walk before me and be blameless. I will establish my covenant. You shall be circumcised." This command, written in the heavenly tablets, became the sign of the eternal bond. Abram's name was changed to Abraham, father of many, and Sarai to Sarah. Even Ishmael, the son born from Hagar, was circumcised, but the covenant remained with Isaac, the promised son. God tested Abraham further. Mastema Satan tried to plant doubt, but Abraham stood firm. In visions he saw two nations arising from him, one righteous Isaac's line and one rebellious Ishmael's. Azazel's influence would shape the rebellious, but God's chosen would prevail. God also showed him the future temple, the rise and fall of priests, and the coming of a chosen one who would atone for sin. As Abraham's life approached its divine climax, the angel Michael was sent to inform him that his time had come. But Abraham's holiness was so radiant that Michael could not deliver the message directly. Instead, they ate together, and Abraham asked that before his departure, he might see all the deeds of God's creation. God granted his request. Angels lifted Abraham in a celestial chariot and carried him through the heavenly realms. He saw the judgment of souls, the scale of virtue and sin, the fate of the righteous and the wicked, and prophetic visions of the Messiah. Abraham, overwhelmed by compassion, pleaded for mercy for the condemned. While this divine journey was unfolding, Sarah, still on earth, noticed Abraham's absence. Isaac told her that his father had been taken up by angels, and fearing that he had died without saying farewell, Sarah was overwhelmed with grief. The weight of this sorrow broke her heart. She wept bitterly, and her soul departed in anguish and love. Sarah died. Sarah's death was not merely a passing, it was a sacred and righteous departure. Her mourning was solemnized with priestly overtones, her faithfulness and virtue revered. Isaac deeply grieved for her. Abraham, upon returning from his heavenly vision, mourned her with sacred feasts and fasts for her soul. He purchased the cave of Machpelah from Ephron the Hittite, establishing the first legal and eternal claim of the covenant people in the land of Canaan. This burial site became the resting place not only of Sarah but of Abraham himself, and later of Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah, a holy ancestral foundation. After the death of Sarah, Abraham continued to walk closely with God. He took another wife, Keturah, of noble lineage, and fathered 6 more sons, Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. These children would become the ancestors of many eastern tribes. To preserve the purity of the covenant line, Abraham gave gifts to the sons of Keturah and sent them eastward, away from Isaac. This was not a rejection, but a prophetic act, ensuring that Isaac remained the uncontested heir of the promise. Jokshan fathered Sheba and Dedan, while Midian became the forefather of the Midianites, many of whom would later reappear in Israel's prophetic story. Sons of Keturah descendants would populate the east, Arabian and even Indian tribes. As Abraham aged, his body weakened, but his spirit burned brightly. He had become a legend in his own lifetime, a father of nations, a prophet, a patriarch, and a friend of God. But even this great servant of the Most High was not exempt from the bounds of mortality. At 175 years old, Abraham died, in peace, with joy in his soul. Isaac and Ishmael buried him together, a final gesture of unity. The heavens opened for Abraham's soul. Michael the archangel carried him through the heavenly realms. He saw, in the judgment of souls, a book of life, the scale of virtue and sin, and heaven and hell an end. And all the generations to come he wept for the condemned and interceded for mercy. He saw the rise of kings, the exile, the return, and the final redemption through his seed, the Messianic one. Thus Abraham became not only the father of nations, but the patriarch of faith, friend of God, and a towering figure whose legacy echoes into eternity. And please, like and subscribe for more truths they never teach in Sunday school.